would ask you first, what would you define as a feminist?
Well, feminism is about wanting equal rights between men and women, right?
Okay.
So yes.
Is that how you would define it?
Yes.
Equality between men and women. So I suppose I'll give you, here, Austin, can you just take over? I'm just, okay. Charitable definition. Feminism is woman's advocacy. That's the most charitable definition I would ever give it. It's never been about equality. This is just factually true. Feminists don't care about equality. There's nothing wrong with women's advocacy, but to parade feminism as an equality movement is laughable. Nothing wrong with women's advocacy, but let's not pretend like feminists really give a fuck about equality. The actual definition of it is, I think it's woman's advocacy plus a man-hating ideology. That's what I think it is.
I see. Okay, so what do you mean by charitable definition?
So charitable would be the nicest.
I see. Okay, but wouldn't you say that that's a definition when it comes to radical feminists instead of like genuine feminism?
Well, I can ask you a couple questions to clarify this. Is patriarchy theory a core tenet of feminism, even normal mainstream feminism?
Can you ask one more time?
Is patriarchy a core tenet of mainstream feminism?
No.
That there is a patriarchy?
Yes.
Okay.
I think you need to explain what's a core ten or whatever you said. I think that's
core tenet. It's a core belief of the ideology.
Okay, that's what I don't think she understood that.
Thank you. Yes.
Okay, and this ideology teaches primarily women what?
That misogyny is ingrained within society, I guess.
Okay, now let me ask you a couple questions. Do you think that the patriarchy has to do with an oppressor-oppressed narrative? So women are oppressed, correct?
I don't agree with that, though. It's just...
You don't think... Okay, do you think women were oppressed historically then?
Yes.
But they're no longer oppressed in any capacity to this day?
In my opinion, no, not in this country.
Okay, that's fair. But you do think they were oppressed historically?
Yes.
Okay. And so, but you believe there's a patriarchy. Does this patriarchy have a tendency to oppress women?
So for me, I personally believe, and according to like the definition of feminism, that it's just about advocating for women's rights when there is some sort of inequality. And so I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but I do feel like you're almost...
But it's not an equality movement. You said it's advocating for women's rights.
But I just feel like what you're defining is only going after, I guess, the like stereotypical feminist who's very radical in their beliefs.
Well, is the stereotype wrong? Let me ask you a question. So every single university in this country, college, whatever, every single one has a feminist study, gender study, women's studies program, right? If you take Feminism 101, or whatever, the introduction to feminism, the lecture, whatever it is, do they teach you about patriarchy and female oppression?
I'm sure they do.
Yeah. And so it sets up an oppressor-oppressed narrative, and it pits the sexes against each other. If you teach swaths of young women that men are to blame for everything, it's men who are the oppressors and women are the oppressed, and women collectively are oppressed and men collectively are the oppressors, are women supposed to feel positive or think positive things towards the oppressor class?
No. I don't think that's the objective, though, with true
But
feminism.
if you take any feminism class, the words patriarchy, oppression, oppressed, oppressor are going to come up. Under feminism, who is the oppressor? Men? Who's the oppressor? Is it men?
Well, according to them, I guess.
According to feminist theory, men are the oppressors, right? And who are the oppressed?
Women.
Do the oppressed get to have contempt for the oppressor?
Yes.
Do the oppressed have to overcome the oppressor? Do the oppressed have to defeat or in some way
I think defeat's fine.
defeat or tear down the oppressor? So this is a narrative that is taught to vast swaths of women, and it teaches women to hate men and have contempt for men and view men as having historically put on some sort of injury onto women. Women have a historical and even current day grievance, a significant grievance, women as a group towards men as a group. So I think that this would teach women to either have bias, on the low end, bias or bigotry against men, or on perhaps the more extreme end, have contempt or hatred towards men. So that's why that's my sense of what feminism is.
Okay, I didn't know what we were agreeing to was your definition of feminism rather than...
But I just walked you through it, and you agreed with me on all these things when it comes to the oppressor-oppressed dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So...
Well, and I think it's fine to say, like if you have a different definition or what you think feminism is, as opposed to what Brian just said, I think it's fine for you to tell us what that is.
I mean, for me, I do believe feminism is about advocating, like you mentioned, more for any inequalities, or even like advocating for women because of just almost like lifting up the women empowerment movement in a sense. And that doesn't have to come at the demise of men, but that is only when it happens in a more radical, I guess, violent way that maybe stereotypical feminists do.
It literally sounded to me like you just kind of agreed with Brian's definition of feminism, to be honest with you. The only kind of caveat that you threw in there was they don't have to be violent to overthrow the oppressor, but Brian never included that in his definition. He just said if there's an oppressed group, it is the oppressed group's duty to throw off the oppressor. It sounds like you kind of agree with that, right?
I just don't think there's anything wrong with, I guess, I almost feel like the feminism is when you acknowledge your role as a woman, a female within society, and being able to uplift other women in that manner, and I guess advocating for any inequalities if they find some, but I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Well, hold on.
Okay. Well, I think that's fair too. I just asked this one question. You think that female advocacy is perfectly acceptable, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so when men advocate for men, is that also perfectly acceptable?
I
Warlord 69, you donated $69. Feminism, I follow other women because they give me power from the oppression that doesn't exist, but because the media keeps telling me that it does exist, I'm gonna keep yelling about it.
Warlord, thank you very much, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, it's very kind of you to send in the dollars there. Yeah, so just kind of quickly back to this. You think it's okay for men to advocate for men too, right?
1,000%.
So what happens when women advocate for women and men advocate for men, and we come to different conclusions as to how each should be treated?
So I'm almost thinking of the example of when men are able to recognize that society makes it so that they're supposed to repress their emotions, and that's why there's such a high unalive rate with men. And when men choose to speak out about that...
Well, hang on. I want to correct something very quickly. Actually, men and women attempt to unalive themselves at about the same rates. It's just that men are way better at it. So they take the final solution. They grab the pistol, and women take pills and shit like that, but men just happen to be far better at doing so. If a woman says, I want to be unalive today, and a man says, I want to be unalive today, they do try to off themselves at the same rates, roughly the same. I mean, it's very close. It's just that men get the job done.
Right, but that doesn't really have anything to do with what I was going to say, is that when men are able to recognize the reality of between man to man, what they go through in their day-to-day life because of them being a man, I don't think there's anything wrong with advocating for one another.
Yeah, sure, but what if they say, okay, well, the reason we're going through all this is because those women fucking suck.
But that's why I also said that I don't believe that it's all people who are that radical when it comes to feminism, and I wouldn't agree with that.
But it's mainstream feminism. It's mainstream feminism. You go to any university, you take an intro to feminism class. They're going to teach you patriarchy theory. They're going to teach you the oppressor-oppressed dynamic between men and women. And they're going to say men are the oppressors and women are the oppressed.
There are still feminists who are actually, thinking how she defined it. I understand
Which is what?
that, just advocating for women's rights. In the same way, men should probably do that too. But what
Advocate for women's rights?
for men's rights.
Oh, okay, sure.
But the thing is that I think we both agree that there's fundamental issues in the mainstream feminism, like you mentioned, and there are some things that need to be changed because the matter of fact is right now it's not a patriarchy anymore. So there is some things that need to be changed. And I also almost think that feminists need to heal from the fact that we got out of this hole, now it's more equal. So
It's the most equal it's ever been.
Exactly. So there are some issues, but as an idea of equality, that's what you meant. Like, that's why
Yeah.
I support.
Well, I mean, my
feminism.
pushback there, just one little nitpick, is when feminists say feminism's about equality, and I say the most charitable definition is it's a women's advocacy movement. If there's a form of equality where women don't stand to benefit or it comes to women's detriment, but it's equality, feminists won't fight for it. Women won't fight for it. So feminism's not an equality movement. And this is just, the perfect example is just forced military conscription. We've had over 100 years of women being able to vote. For men to be able to vote, we have to be subject to forced military conscription. We've got to register with the Selective Service. 100 years, feminists are not saying equalize forced military conscription. And in that time period, we've had numerous World War II, Korean War, Vietnam War. Men were drafted in these wars. Men would still be alive had they not been drafted. There are men who are still alive who were drafted, who have terrible injuries. I'm talking specifically about Vietnam, who are still alive, who've got PTSD, all this kind of stuff. And so I don't really think feminists are like striving for equality. You're striving to secure female benefits. And if that means fighting for equality and that gets women benefits, they'll do it. But you'll never fight for equality if it could conceivably come to the detriment of women. And I don't think you can actually make an argument against that because the glaring example is forced military conscription. I think being drafted for anybody is a detriment to one's life. If you're drafted into the military, I think it's hard to argue that it's not a detriment. It would be a detriment to women if they were subject to military conscription and all the negative ramifications that come with either being drafted or if you don't register for the Selective Service, there's various issues that can arise there. But where are the feminists in the streets like, oh, I want to be drafted? They ain't fine for it. It's not an equality movement.
Okay, so then when you said the charitable definition was women's advocacy, then putting that aside, like the equality or fighting for equality, wouldn't that just be like more of a movement to empower other women? So I don't.
Sure.
So maybe then.
Sure, but you can't parade it around as an equality movement when it's not.
Okay, then I can agree with that.
Okay, sure.
So
Well, I have a very quick question I'd like to ask everybody on the panel. Get everybody to participate on why we're on the topic of feminism.
Wait, Andrew, I apologize.
Yeah.
She was in the middle of something. I do just want to give her an opportunity
Oh, yeah,
just to
sorry.
finish it. But then we'll ask her question. Go ahead.
sorry,
If you forgot, you're in the middle of something. If you forgot,
I
it's
kind of just forgot.
it's all right. All right, go ahead, Andrew.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to jump in there. I thought the exchange was done. So just very briefly, I would like to kind of tell you guys a few things. You are aware that women couldn't have credit cards until very recently, and they couldn't have bank accounts, right? This is fairly recent. Did you guys know that?
do you
Women
mind-
couldn't have those things.
Do you mind telling me how recent?
Yeah, well, actually, I'm going to pull up the exact date just so you have it. So I think that this was, let's see, 1974, looks like. So 1974, before they could have credit cards, right? That seems pretty unfair, right? They couldn't even have them, right? Or bank accounts, things like that. That seems pretty. Do you guys agree that that's fundamentally unfair?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I would like to ask you this question, though. In the 1950s, when women couldn't have these things, can I get a show of hands of the women here who think that relationships right now in the year 2024 are more stable and better than they were in the 1950s, just by a show of hands? Can I get a show of hands of the women who think that the relationships in the year 2024 are more unstable than they were in the 1950s?
Unstable? Unstable?
Unstable.
Yeah, it's more. I'm pretty sure they are.
So just nobody else has an opinion? Do you think that the relationships in the year 1950 were more or less stable than they are now? By a show of hands.
Well, he said more.
More stable.
Yeah. Do you think that they were more stable in the 1950s? Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Than they are right now? And do you think in the year 2024 that relationships are less stable than they were in the 1950s?
Yes.
So can any of you explain to me why it would be in a million years that even though women were suffering under this type of horrific oppression, that relationships were better under that oppression than they are right now when women are the most liberated they've ever been?
Well, stability can mean a lot of things. It can be stably bad. You can, because they
Do you
did.
think that they were stably bad, or do you think that the relationships were better? When you talk to your grandparents, do they tell you how horrible things were, or do they tell you things were better? You tell me.
Honestly, like I had a lot of mixed opinions on that. Like,
Yeah. They mostly say it was better, right? They mostly say it was better. Most of the time you talk to people who are older than you, especially significantly older than you, I can tell you right now the 90s were better. The 90s were better than the year 2024. I promise you they were better. In every conceivable way I can think of, it's not nostalgia, they were better.
but I think that has to do something with also, like I mentioned before, with social media and people feeling like they have to put up a face and all that stuff. That's my opinion on it.
Yeah, it's not just
Well,
one
okay,
thing.
well, wait a second. That's really weird because the internet is a recent invention. This is not an old invention. People, don't you think people in the 90s, so let me ask you this. The year is 1980. There is no internet. There's no internet in the year 1980. Do you think relationships were better or worse?
Better.
Better. They're better, right?
Well, they were more.
So
stable,
now,
yeah.
so now moving forward, right? You hit the internet age. You think that the internet age is what destroyed everything?
I think so. Well, I don't think it's the only reason, but there's a big influence in that. 100%. Yeah.
What is it?
Like I said.
What is the thing about social media that destroyed everything between men and women?
Because people it's
E-boys probably did it.
people.
Probably E-boys.
People try to portray themselves as someone they're not in social media. Everyone's are constantly trying to one-up each other. There's no authentic
Twerking.
connections anymore.
Definitely twerking to that.
Dating apps are way more superficially based. There's a lot of reasons. Yeah.
Yeah, so what's the number one reason that you think things were better back then?
I also
K-pop. Sorry.
And by the way, the reason I brought this example up is because in the year 1980, women had those equalities, right? They had those equalities, and yet you still say that the relationships were better, even then. So are we pinpointing this on the internet? And what is the thing about the internet that has messed relationships up?
there's more easy access to more people because of the internet, so therefore you're looking at more people than they did back then, where back then they actually believed in true love, I guess, and now it's kind of way more accessible, and so therefore that traditional marriage or traditional kind of love is dying out.
Yeah, people see that they have more options now. Even if that's not the case, they're like, oh, there's this guy or this girl, and there's this, yeah.
Okay, so you think that the entirety of relationship dynamics have been destroyed, not because of the feminist move for women to become empowered snobs, but rather because women have more choices in men, and so what? They're going for a select group of men?
I
maybe?
think men also have those choices as well, and maybe I can
Mm,
consider
no, men don't have those choices.
it's still more easily accessible for men with the
No,
internet.
it's not more easily accessible for men. It was way more easy. So here, I can demonstrate this for you. If you were localized and there was only 50 women who were in your community versus 50 men, right? Wouldn't the women be far more accessible to the men and the women to the men? Because these are your only choices, right? Right? Well, now it's a buffet. But let me ask you a question. Do you think on a dating app that a guy who's as attractive as you are just for a male as opposed to a female, do you think that you get more people DMing you or he gets more people DMing him?
Most likely me.
Most likely you.
Wait, do you have a
So
brother?
that means that from the sexual selection perspective, you have way more options than he does, right?
Wait, really quick, do you have a brother?
I do.
How old is he?
He is 18.
18. Okay, still
Actually,
big. Oh, 19. And you're 22, right? Who's crushing? Like, who could crush it more? You know?
Crush it?
Who could crush it more? Like, if you guys had to do like a competition, just to fuck or whatever, like, who could just crush it?
I don't like those two words in the same sentence, but I would say I guess me.
Yeah. Like you would, but it wouldn't. It's not even a competition, right? Like you would just fuck them up.
Yeah, and I can't not acknowledge the fact that like it's true that when you see like a woman's like dating profile versus a man's, and they could be equally attractive, it's always the women that get more matches, and I'm not going to deny that, but I do feel that because of the internet, it does still make it more easily accessible to both man and woman.
There's a lot of men who prefer to not commit to a lot of women anymore. Like, that's pretty common in this day and age.
Maybe the top tier guys, maybe.
I would say most. At least our age. Yeah.
Yeah, but those men, I mean, most men aren't willing to commit to a woman.
I feel like a lot nowadays more.
What percentage of men are you attracted to?
I don't have a percentage. I think my type is weird, but yeah. I don't know.
Okay.